control. So this is like a summary of what I will be touching upon. Are we going to have my presentation projected?
Sí, sí, está. Sí.
¿Lo va pasando desde ahí?
Sí, vale. Sí, sí. Si quieres, bueno. Sí. Bien, bueno, pues por empezar con.
So let's start with some figures. This is from the Vodafone Foundation report from 2007, and it gives us a brief idea of the willingness of these people regarding this issue. So people with sensorial disabilities do use these support projects or products right now, as you can see here. You can see those areas that are marked with a circle. And here we have the different possibilities of assistance, different support and technological products. We can see this column over here. Then we have the family support or through family or health assistance, unremunerated assistance. In sensorial disabilities, we can see that nowadays we do use these support projects mainly, as you can see here. But I wanted to talk about these graphs because in the future there is a perception that both elderly people and people with disabilities, they do use this technology. There's this technology support. So we have this initial idea that these groups do want to have this technological support. These are figures from a study carried out in Tecnalia this year. This is a market research study linked to some surveys carried out with final users. And we already know that we all have the perception that this is the result. So TV, mobile phones and telephones and DVDs, and the internet access, computers. We do see all of the equipment and technical equipment that we find in these people with in the home of these disabled people. As for new technologies and people that are disabled, this is also a conclusion from the Vodafone report. We can see that there is no much variation among the different groups, disabled groups. So we can see that sometimes they have more or less technological devices at home, but basically 74% of elderly people do have these devices. And in future, we know that everything we're doing right now is going to be used. At least this is our perception right now. The next step that we have carried out in this market research, well, here we see what are the difficulties of the daily use of these devices at home. And the conclusion along these lines is that 60% of users had a sensation of independence, but just limited. 60% didn't feel safe enough. And another important percentage said that they thought it was uncomfortable to use. So these are the different explanations of why they didn't use these devices at home, or what were the difficulties. I'm always talking about elderly, disabled people. And then the million-dollar question. This is what we always question ourselves. So how are we going to handle this home control, domotic control? Here we have radical opinions. There are some data that state that they would like to have a single unique control device, and there was another important percentage of people who said that they didn't want to have one single device. So then came the next question. Why? Those who said no, well, those who said yes, they were happy to just have one device, but we should focus on those people who thought that it was not interesting to have these control devices. So the main rejection, the main reason for the rejection was price, and they didn't know anything about it. The initial perception was that something that handles your issues at home has to be expensive. So 60% said, I'm going to reject this remote control that is going to help me out at home. Even if it gives me independence or whatever, I'm going to reject it because of a price issue. There are other messages where I don't need it, it doesn't convey trust to me. That was another level. But price was a key issue. So this gives us some hints already on what we should focus on. The last one of the questions, another question that we asked, it was not the last question, but it was like a common thread that we used in our questions. And the question was, do you use domotics? Do you trust it? In what degree? 60% approx knew what domotics were about and why you used it. 43% said yes, directly. 17% said it was an induced thing. They said, yeah, I know what domotics is. So then we were asking, do you know a specific domotic system? And 63% said yes, and 13% had been already offered some systems, and only 1% have a domotic facility or system in their home. So this gives us a general overview of what has to be done. There's a lot of things to be done still. And if we wanted to establish some policies to launch a product in the market, we should focus on price so as to try and convince people that if this price is reasonable, users would be interested in having these devices.
Bueno, cambiando un poco de tema, ya hemos hecho una introducción inicial de qué es lo que sería.
We have already carried out an introduction of the interest of these people, disabled people linked to domotics and these kind of devices. And now let's focus on the value chain since the very beginning of the creation of an idea until the device is launched into the market. This comes from a report of the European Community. Two entities drafted this report together last year. And in this value chain, as you can see, there's two green horizontal lines. At the top, it's the offer perception. These are the companies that develop this technology and these products. And the bottom line is the users, the demand of this technology. Different steps that can be carried out. From the very beginning of the idea is research and development. Basically, this is done by centers, university, technological associations, and R&D centers. Then there's the manufacturing process, the distribution, the final distribution, and that's aimed at the retail sector, and finally the purchasing and financing and sales. This is co-financed by different entities and organizations. From the point of view of the final user, they are not interested in all of this. They're interested in what they want to buy. So you can see here a whole advisory process, and companies should focus on this. When we have to select a product, we need to know what you have to buy, and there's professional entities and different entities and associations that could help along these lines. When the user wants to buy something, well, there's different modalities, as we will see later on. So we try to advise and select the best for the different users. And then they buy the product, we hand in the product, and finally we have to concentrate on the use of the product. So the role, the most important role in the whole standardization process, well, we know that there is a first standardization process, which is at the initial stage. So when the idea is developed, when a product is developed, we have to focus on the existing rules or standards. In the manufacturing stage, there are some standards, and there's feedback along these lines. What I'm trying to say is that we don't necessarily need to stick to the existing order. There's new standards that come out, and we can adapt to them. And finally, the user stage. When the devices are used, we generate new expectations, and we see how we can generate new standards along these lines that, again, gives us new feedback on the new standards. So this is not a static, fixed process. It's alive, and it's something which is constantly changing in the market.
Now, regarding what we mentioned earlier, the most complicated part, which is how to distribute these to companies. You can see here a matrix, a graph which is probably hard to make out from the distance, but just for you to get a grasp of what that report is about, that report that we drafted together with the European Union and with companies from all over the continent. 5 products were selected. Auditory aids, headsets, braille readers, applications for voice communication, and environmental control systems. So for each and every one of them, there was an analysis of how to access, how the end user accesses the product. It was so complicated that depending on the product and the country, it could be a totally different situation. In blue, you have the medical model where the doctor actually prescribes what the user should get, and they might even bring forth a specific product. And then the social mode, meaning associations and organizations prescribe or somehow assess or even advise the user. And then in pink, that's where the consumer accesses the market, him or herself, and tries to look around, to shop around. Then you've got some yellow and orange boxes which represent mixes of 2 modalities. So what do we mean by this? It's so complicated for a company to access the market if they want to create economies of scale and export economies. Because